Look at this image on your screen. 1,000 words, as they say. Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir is presenting a box of critical minerals to Donald Trump. It's evident by now that Trump loves his gifts and Asim Munir the involvement in economic affairs of Pakistan. Case in point, Munir's presence at the recent crypto meeting with the Binance CEO. Now, let's look at a development from Wednesday evening, December 10th. Donald Trump's administration approved financing worth $1.25 billion by the US Export Import Bank or EXIM Bank for Pakistan's Reko Diq mine, one of the largest undeveloped copper and gold mines in the world, which is located in Balochistan. In a video message posted on X, US chargé d'affaires in Islamabad Natalie Baker said that EXIM Bank would invest up to $2 billion to support the Pakistan mining sector in the coming years. And this, she said, would bring in US mining equipment and services needed to build and operate the Reko Diq mine, along with creating 6,000 jobs in the US and 7,500 jobs in Balochistan. So, what is the Reko Diq mine? What is its significance? What is this new US-Pakistan mining bonhomie all about? And how is the Pakistan military directly involved? We'll try to answer these questions in this edition of Everybody's Business. And because this story is going to be a little long, we'll divide it up into sections. The first chapter in this saga is the history and geography of Reko Diq. Reko Diq, which means sandy peak in the Balochi language, is located in the remote Chagai district of Balochistan. Chagai is the largest district in Pakistan and Balochistan is the largest province in the country, though also the least populated one. Majority of the inhabitants are Baloch with a mix of other ethnic groups. Reko Diq sits in a harsh, arid part of the country near the borders with Iran and Afghanistan. The landscape is desert, rocky hills, little vegetation, blistering summers, freezing winters, and almost no rainfall. Roads are sparse and the environment is rugged, making development very challenging. Reko Diq lies not too far away from the Ras Ko Hills, the same mountain range where Pakistan conducted its 1998 nuclear tests. Now, according to geological data, the mining area holds roughly 5.9 billion ton of ore with average copper and gold grades that make commercial mining viable. Estimates show millions of ounces of gold and millions of tons of copper, enough for decades of production. In fact, projections show that once it starts producing copper concentrate in 2028, the life of the Reko Diq operation is expected to be nearly 40 years. Construction is planned in two phases with an expected combined process capacity of 90 million ton per annum when operations begin in 2028 and a planned doubling of output in the next phase. The estimated cost of phase 1 is about $7 billion and according to a Reuters estimate, once the operation begins, the mine is expected to generate about $70 billion in free cash flow over its lifespan. We'll discuss a little later in the video how that may not be all too easy. The project is being developed as an open pit mine, which means huge pits are dug to extract ore and then processed on site. It is essentially a surface extraction method in which miners remove soil and rock layer by layer to expose and extract ore from the pit. It is used when deposits lie close to the surface and allows for high volume, low cost recovery compared to underground mining. Now, who owns Reko Diq? Well, it's a bit of a long answer, but stay with me. It's currently owned by an international consortium led by Barrick Gold and Pakistani stakeholders, but only after years of legal and financing hurdles. Reko Diq's story starts in the 1990s when BHP Billiton, an Australian mining giant, signed an exploration deal with the Balochistan government. In 1993, the Chagai Hills Exploration Joint Venture Agreement was signed between the two that gave BHP a 75% stake, left the province with 25% and set a 2% royalty, which was unusually low for a resource this valuable. Analysts say that this shaky deal was symptomatic of poor governance, lack of transparent processes, the invisible hand of the Pakistan Army, and poor understanding of mining deals. It became the foundation of everything that went wrong later. When BHP walked away in 2000, it quietly transferred the project to a much smaller Australian firm called Mincor. The government didn't question the handover or try to renegotiate, effectively letting a massive copper gold asset slip to a minor player without scrutiny. In 2006, Tethian Copper Company, which is owned by Canada's Barrick Gold and Chile's Antofagasta, took over. Even then, the legal ambiguities from the original deal were not cleaned up. By 2010, TCC had completed a feasibility study, but when it applied for a mining lease in 2011, the Balochistan government abruptly rejected it, demanding local smelting, higher royalties, and more benefits for the community. By this time, TCC had already spent about $220 million on the project, and it promptly went to the World Bank's International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, or ICSID, in 2012, claiming Pakistan had breached its investment treaty obligations. Parallelly, Pakistan's Supreme Court voided the original agreement in 2013, declaring that TCC had no rights at all. But this domestic decision directly clashed with Pakistan's international treaty obligations. By 2017, the World Bank Tribunal rejected Pakistan's arguments, and in 2019, it handed down a massive $6 billion penalty to Pakistan. Now, looking at this huge liability, Pakistan negotiated an out of court settlement in 2022. The same year, Asim Munir became the army chief. And what was this settlement? Barrick agreed to lead a reconstituted Reko Diq project, with Barrick Canada owning 50% and the remaining 50% split between Pakistani federal state-owned companies and the government of Balochistan. Chile's Antofagasta exited the project as part of this restructuring. And that brings us to the current scenario in which the mine is being prepared for commercial development, with production expected to begin in 2028. The International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, is a prominent financier directly linked to the Reko Diq project. In 2024, the IFC agreed to provide at least $300 million in debt financing. According to a Reuters report, the Asian Development Bank will provide a $410 million financing package to help develop the mine. This is composed of two loans, $300 million to Barrick and a $110 million financing guarantee for the government of Pakistan. And now, the EXIM Bank financing has added $1.25 billion to the mix. Which brings us to our next chapter. What Reko Diq holds and why the US is gravitating toward it. We've already discussed how Reko Diq is a massive geological prize sitting in Pakistan's Chagai district, one of the largest undeveloped copper gold deposits on the planet, with 5.9 billion ton of ore and roughly 2.2 billion ton considered economically recoverable. Over a projected mine life of about 40 years, it is expected to produce hundreds of thousands of tons of copper annually alongside significant gold byproducts. This isn't a short-term extraction project, but a multi-generational industrial base. At its core, Reko Diq is a giant bowl of volcanic rock that was cooked and cracked open by magma millions of years ago. When that hot fluid cooled, it left behind tiny specks of copper and gold spread through the rock. This kind of deposit is called a porphyry system, and it's the same type that powers some of the world's biggest copper mines in Chile and Peru. Essentially, a porphyry system is a huge, long-lived geological zone where metal-rich fluids from cooling magma spread tiny particles of copper, gold, and other minerals throughout large volumes of rock. Because the metal is spread out, the only practical way to extract it is open-pit mining. Engineers dig wide and send the rocks for processing. The rock is then crushed to powder and mixed with air and chemicals so that the copper-bearing minerals float to the top. This produces a copper gold concentrate, which is then shipped for smelting. Now, from Pakistan's lens, this carries enormous economic significance. Copper is emerging as the metal of the energy transition. It is indispensable for electric vehicles, transmission grids, renewable power, semiconductors, and battery technologies. As global demand accelerates, countries with copper reserves gain leverage in a rapidly shifting industrial landscape. And this brings us to why the US is suddenly paying attention. The US is racing to secure diversified supplies of critical minerals as it tries to reduce dependence on China, which dominates copper processing and refining. Copper may not be formally labeled as a critical mineral everywhere, but in practical terms, it is critical to America's industrial and clean energy ambitions. Supporting Reko Diq through financing, diplomatic backing, or strategic engagement aligns with Washington's push to build mineral supply chains. And that sets the stage for the next chapter of this story, how Reko Diq has become entangled in the geopolitics of 2025. So, we all know that China recently squeezed global mineral supplies in retaliation to US tariffs as it dominates this sector. Countries are securing alternative copper and critical mineral supplies by investing in new projects and partnerships across Africa, Latin America, and South Asia, and by backing mines in places like the DRC, Chile, Peru, and Mongolia. Naturally, Trump is also seeking to counter this dominance of China. And despite its closeness to Beijing, Pakistan has offered Washington access. Pakistani analysts say that while China remains a very close ally of Pakistan, there is growing disillusionment among the people. In fact, the Frontier Works Organization, a military run engineering and construction organization headed by a two-star general, recently signed a $500 million deal with US Strategic Minerals, a Missouri based company. The deal was to supply minerals such as copper and antimony from deposits spread across vast terrains. It's important to note that China never really had any formal involvement in Reko Diq. But Beijing's interest was widely assumed because the mine sits in Balochistan, the same province that anchors major China Pakistan economic corridor projects. Early CPEC plans imagined transport corridors, including a long discussed railway upgrade that would eventually improve access across Balochistan and could have supported mineral logistics. But China's big infrastructure push in the province stalled. Funding the rail upgrade did not move ahead, security concerns persisted, and Pakistan has since turned to the Asian Development Bank to finance key rail upgrades. As a result, the once expected Chinese built transport spine through Balochistan, which many assumed would naturally position China as a leading player around Reko Diq, never materialized. Today, China's earlier momentum in the region has slowed, while Western and Gulf investors are the ones shaping Reko Diq's development. Of course, Pakistan's mineral push predates Trump. Balochistan holds billions of dollars worth of copper and gold, but Western projects have long been stalled in legal disputes, most notably in the Reko Diq mine. Imran Khan revived it in 2022 with a settlement giving Barrick Gold 50% ownership. The IFC later committed at least $300 million and Barrick signed a $440 million equipment deal. Imran Khan's government worked closely with the army to negotiate with Barrick Gold and craft a deal that led to resumption of operations. Now, in the present day, Pakistan has seen backing from Trump, and not just on critical minerals. The newfound camaraderie between the US and Pakistan could be seen when Trump welcomed Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir into the Oval Office. And at this meeting, the US President spoke of massive oil reserves in Pakistan. But here's the catch. Critics have repeatedly warned about these grand estimations both from Pakistan and the US. Of course, not without evidence. Trump's remarks on the oil reserves left many, even in Pakistan, completely confused. And naturally so. Pakistan has very limited known crude deposits. It spends about 31% of its import bill on fuel and imports about 80% of its petroleum needs. In May 2019, then Prime Minister Imran Khan said that drilling in the Arabian Sea had hit an oil and gas jackpot that would fulfill Pakistan's fuel needs for decades. Those wells were abandoned soon after because there were no viable reserves there. Again, in September 2024, a senior Pakistan military official said that there were discoveries that could change the destiny of the country. But there's no sign of any proof or information on what this destiny changing asset is. At a Pakistani mineral summit in April, Shehbaz Sharif said that if Pakistan harvested mineral reserves he said were valued at trillions of dollars, it could transform the country's economy, which has $130 billion in external debt. Also to be kept in mind is the fact that Trump's warmth towards Pakistan wasn't always there. While announcing the EXIM Baker support, Natalie Baker said that the Trump administration has made the forging of deals like this one central to American diplomacy. But back in 2018, he had accused Islamabad of lies and deceit. He also cut military ties and aid to a large extent, but later warmed up toward Imran Khan. Next, US President Joe Biden kept far, far away from Pakistan, and in Trump's second term, he has heaped praise on Asim Munir. The same Asim Munir, who was also present along with Pakistan PM Sharif at the signing between FWO and US Strategic Metals. And the same Asim Munir, whose military stands to gain from the Reko Diq project and other mining efforts in Pakistan. How? Well, that's our next chapter. Reko Diq hands the military the sort of prize every state contractor dreams of: long life, high value contracts, and a steady export stream. The Army already runs contractors that build and operate big projects. Think the Frontier Works organization getting mining and construction work, and the National Logistics Cell moving heavy ore and equipment. So when mines scale up, their balance sheets scale up too. Of course, the Army-run FWO does not have the funds or the expertise to develop the Reko Diq project. Institutionally, the Army's seat on the Special Investment Facilitation Council gives it a front row view and influence over which foreign investors get fast tracks and which local outfits get favored contracts. It's a bit like institutional capture. State firms, Army-run companies, and related welfare trusts stand to pick up revenues, service contracts, and long-term logistics work. So, the upshot? Mines like Reko Diq don't just produce copper. They produce contracts, transport fee, construction margins, and political leverage. Which explains why military leaders are front and center at mining pitches. It's less about holding a shiny rock for the camera and more about making sure the army gets the first bite at a very large pie. When Pakistan launched the Special Investment Facilitation Council in June 2023, it was sold as the miracle single window that would reboot the economy. The same grand claims once made about the $60 billion China-Pakistan economic corridor. And much like CPEC, SIFC stares at the same fate. At the core of why these initiatives keep failing is the military's deep grip over Pakistan's economic decision making. Asim Munir co-chairs the SIFC with the Prime Minister, while senior generals vet major investment proposals. Military-linked conglomerates, from the Fauji Foundation to the Army Welfare Trust, already dominate sectors ranging from real estate to fertilizers, creating an economy tilted towards defense-driven priorities rather than competitive private enterprise. Economists argue that this model consistently favors flashy, capital-heavy projects over real reforms. Of course, compounding the problem is Pakistan's failure to curb terrorism. An extraction at Reko Diq represents a steep test for Pakistan's ability to execute a complex project mired in decades of disputes, litigation, and capacity failures. Pakistan has consistently failed to prove that it can host and manage large-scale resource development. The mining at Reko Diq will be even more challenging because of the terrain, population, and realities of the region. Which brings us to our next chapter, the challenges in Balochistan. Buried at the foot of an extinct volcano near the frontier with Iran and Afghanistan, Reko Diq's location in Balochistan creates a set of structural, environmental, and political challenges. First, the terrain is harsh and remote. Chagai district is an arid desert with extreme temperatures, limited roads, and long distances from major ports or industrial centers. Building and maintaining heavy mining infrastructure in such conditions is costly and slow. Second, water scarcity is severe. Reko Diq requires substantial water for ore processing, but the region receives minimal rainfall and has very limited groundwater. Securing sustainable water supplies and doing so without affecting local communities remains one of the project's hardest technical constraints. Water from phases 1 and 2 will be sourced from a sedimentary groundwater system located about 70 kilometers to the northwest of the mining area. Water in the system is saline and challenging to access, and as such, it is not suitable for human consumption or most agricultural or industrial uses without significant treatment. Third, Balochistan faces security concerns. Militant groups operate in the province, and attacks on state and economic infrastructure have occurred for years. Any major foreign-backed project must manage security risks, which increases operating costs and can delay timelines. And finally, local political dynamics are sensitive. Many Baloch communities have for long felt excluded from resource revenues and distrust large external projects. Ensuring fair benefit sharing, local employment, and transparent governance is essential to preventing social resistance. The Baloch people view outsiders with suspicion, and their anger about Islamabad exploiting the province's vast natural resources has been one of the key themes fueling the insurgency that began around 2004. So, to conclude this story, in the final chapter, we'll look at where all this leaves Reko Diq. On paper, it is a national jackpot for Pakistan, one of the world's largest undeveloped copper gold deposits. But in reality, it sits at the intersection of Pakistan's deepest vulnerabilities: weak governance, an overpowering military with questionable intent, fractured and messy politics, and a history of watching others extract value while the country flounders. The Pakistan Army's footprint in Balochistan fuels persistent fears that even this new deal may repeat an old pattern, where revenues flow upward to federal and military linked institutions, while Baloch communities continue to live without water, hospitals, or schools. And the terrain, insecurity, and lack of infrastructure mean that Pakistan will shoulder high costs even before the mine becomes productive. Meanwhile, experts point out something else. The global players circling Reko Diq, the US, Gulf sovereign funds, multinational miners, are positioned to gain far more, with Pakistan largely exporting raw value while others captured the high tech, high profit segments of the mineral chain. In a world desperate for copper, antimony, and critical minerals, Reko Diq offers the US and its allies a strategic foothold at minimal cost to themselves. But Pakistan becomes a supplier, not a beneficiary. And many analysts, even inside Pakistan, fear that the world will walk away richer while Chagai remains unchanged.